Hi, my name is Olivia Carter. I'm 22 years old, and I live in New York City, United States. I'm a university student studying psychology, and like many students, I've always wanted to speak English fluently and confidently. English is my first language technically, but I grew up in a bilingual household where my parents mostly spoke Spanish at home. So, even though I understood English perfectly, I struggled to think in English naturally. Whenever I tried to speak, my mind would first form the sentence in Spanish, and then I would translate it into English. This made me slow, hesitant, and sometimes even nervous when speaking. I knew I needed to change something, but I didn't know how. I remember the first time I realized this was a real problem. I was in my freshman year of college, and I had to give a class presentation. I had prepared everything in English, but when I stood in front of the class, my mind went blank. I kept searching for words, and my thoughts were in Spanish. I stuttered, lost confidence, and felt embarrassed. After that, I made up my mind. I needed to train myself to think in English naturally. But how? At first, I did what everyone else does. I watched English movies, listened to English music, and tried to read more books. But it wasn't enough. I was still translating in my head. That's when I started experimenting with different techniques and discovered what actually worked. And today, I want to share my journey and the steps I took to make English my thinking language. 1. Surrounding myself with English. The first step was immersing myself in English as much as possible. I changed everything: my phone settings, my social media, even my daily conversations. I stopped watching movies with Spanish subtitles and started watching them with English subtitles. At first, it was uncomfortable. My brain kept trying to translate, but I forced myself to focus on understanding directly in English. After a few weeks, I noticed I was thinking less in Spanish. I also started listening to English podcasts every morning while commuting to my university. I chose simple ones at first, like TED Talks and English learning podcasts. Slowly, I began to understand more and more without translating in my head. One of my professors, Dr. Mitchell, once told me, "Language is like water. If you swim in it, you learn to move naturally." That stuck with me. I decided to swim in English completely. 2. Speaking to myself in English, this might sound crazy, but I started talking to myself in English. Every time I was alone, I described what I was doing in English. For example, if I was making coffee, I would say, "Now I am pouring water into the cup. The coffee smells strong. It's a cold morning." At first, it felt unnatural, but I kept doing it. Slowly, my brain started forming sentences in English on its own. I realized that the more I practiced this, the more comfortable I became with English. 3. Thinking in English before sleeping, one of the biggest changes I made was training my mind to think in English before sleeping. Every night, I forced myself to reflect on my day in English. Instead of thinking, "Hoy tuve un día ocupado en la universidad," I changed it to, "Today, I had a busy day at the university." It was tough at first. I kept switching back to Spanish, but I corrected myself each time. After a month, my brain automatically started thinking in English before bed. It felt like a small victory. 4. Learning to express my feelings in English. One of the hardest things was learning to express emotions in English. It's easy to learn vocabulary, but emotions are deeply connected to our first language. Whenever I was upset, I noticed I always thought in Spanish. So, I started journaling in English. Every night, I wrote about my feelings in English. It helped me find the right words and express myself more naturally. My friend Emily, who is a native English speaker, also helped me. She told me, "Don't just translate feelings, live them in English." That made a huge difference. 5. Making mistakes and accepting them someday. I was talking to my classmate James, and I made a mistake while explaining something. I immediately got embarrassed, but he just smiled and said, "You don't have to be perfect. Just keep talking." That was a turning point. I realized I was afraid of making mistakes, and that fear was slowing me down. So I stopped worrying about grammar and just spoke. The more I spoke, the more natural it felt. 6. Practicing conversations with friends. I was lucky to have friends like Emily and James, who were patient with me. Every day, we spoke in English, even when I made mistakes. I also joined an English speaking club at my university. We met once a week and talked about different topics: travel, books, daily life. Talking to people in English helped my brain switch to English mode faster. The day I realized I was thinking in English, one day, I was walking to class, and I caught myself thinking in English. I was planning my day in my head, and it was all in English. No translation, no hesitation, just pure English thoughts. I smiled because I knew I had trained my mind to think in English naturally. After that moment, when I realized I was thinking in English, I knew I was on the right path, but I didn't stop there. I kept pushing myself to make English the default language in my brain. I want to share the deeper details of what worked for me, including some small but powerful changes that helped me break free from translating in my head. The power of describing everything around me. One of the biggest challenges I faced was that even though I could write well in English, my mind still thought in Spanish first. So, I forced myself to describe everything in English as I experienced it. For example, let's say I was in a coffee shop. Before, my brain would think, "Estoy en una cafetería. El aroma del café es fuerte y hay mucha gente aquí." Then I would translate it in my head into English. "I am in a coffee shop. The smell of coffee is strong, and there are many people here." But I needed to stop this translation process. So I trained my brain to skip Spanish completely. Now I would just think directly in English. "Wow, this place smells amazing. The coffee is rich and strong. The barista looks busy, and the sound of people chatting makes the place feel lively." At first, I had to remind myself to do this. I would physically whisper descriptions to myself when I was alone, or I would write them down on my phone. Slowly, my brain started forming these thoughts naturally in English without switching from Spanish first. 9. Thinking in English using questions and answers. Another thing that helped me a lot was training myself to have small conversations in my head. For example, I would ask myself, "What do I need to do today?" And then I would answer in English. "I have a psychology lecture in the morning. Then I need to study for my exam. Maybe I'll go for coffee with Emily after class." I started doing this for everything. If I was getting dressed, I would think, "What should I wear today?" Then answer myself, "It's cold outside, so I should wear my blue sweater and jeans. Maybe I'll take my scarf too." At first, it felt weird, but over time, my brain became comfortable with it. The more I practiced, the faster my thoughts flowed in English. 10. Using English for emotions and deep thoughts. One of the hardest parts was expressing my emotions in English. It's easy to learn basic sentences like, I'm happy or I'm tired, but emotions are more complex than that. For example, if I was feeling overwhelmed with my studies, my first instinct was to think in Spanish. Me siento estresada porque tengo demasiadas cosas que hacer. But I forced myself to think in English. I feel overwhelmed because I have too many things to do. At first, it was difficult. My emotions were so deeply connected to Spanish that I struggled to express them in English. So, I started keeping a personal diary in English. Every night, I would write about my day, how I felt, and what was on my mind, all in English. If I didn't know a word, I would look it up. For example, one day I wrote, Today was exhausting. I had too many assignments, and I feel drained. I wish I had more time to relax. Slowly, I started feeling emotions directly in English. One day, when I was stressed about an upcoming test, my brain automatically thought, I'm so anxious about this exam. That's when I knew my brain was truly shifting towards English. 11th, training my brain with everyday conversations. Another thing that helped me was preparing for daily conversations in my head before they happened. For example, before going to a restaurant, I would think, how will I order food in English? So, in my mind, I would practice, Hi, can I get a chicken sandwich with a side of fries, please? Or, if I had to ask a professor for help, I would think, how can I ask this in English? Then I would practice, Excuse me, Professor, I have a question about today's lecture. Could you explain this concept again? By doing this, I became more confident. When the real situation happened, my brain already had the words ready, and I didn't struggle to find them. 12. Overcoming the fear of making mistakes, one of my biggest struggles was my fear of making mistakes. I used to worry so much about saying things wrong that I would hesitate before speaking. But then I realized that mistakes are part of the learning process. One day, I was talking to my classmate James, and I accidentally said, I have went to the library. James smiled and said, You mean, I have gone to the library? I felt embarrassed, but he continued, It's okay. You're learning, and your English is already really good. That moment changed my mindset. Instead of being afraid of mistakes, I started seeing them as opportunities to improve. Now, whenever I make a mistake, I just correct myself and move on. This has helped me speak more fluently without hesitation. 13. The final step, forgetting about Spanish. The ultimate goal was to stop thinking in Spanish completely. I knew I was getting better, but there was still a part of my brain that relied on Spanish when I was tired or stressed. So, I gave myself a challenge. For one entire week, I would only think in English. Every time I caught myself thinking in Spanish, I stopped and forced myself to reframe the thought in English. For example, if I thought, Tengo que llamar a mi mamá después de la clase, I would immediately change it to, I need to call my mom after class. By the end of the week, something amazing happened. My brain stopped reaching for Spanish first. English had become my thinking language. 14. My life after training my brain in English. Now, English feels natural to me. I no longer translate in my head. I express my emotions in English, and I can have deep conversations without hesitation. One day, I was on the phone with my cousin in Spain, and she suddenly asked, "Olivia, do you ever think in Spanish anymore?" I paused and realized I hadn't thought in Spanish all day. My thoughts had been in English from the moment I woke up. That's when I knew I had finally trained my mind to think in English naturally. 15. Building an English identity, becoming Olivia in English. One thing I noticed during this journey was that I had two versions of myself. One, Spanish-speaking Olivia, the version of me who felt most comfortable in Spanish, thought in Spanish, and expressed emotions naturally in Spanish. Two, English-speaking Olivia, the version of me who was learning to think, speak, and live in English. At first, my English-speaking self didn't feel real to me. It felt like I was acting or pretending. But I wanted to become this version naturally, so I made a conscious decision to live as English-speaking Olivia as much as possible. How did I do this? Changing my inner voice to English. Everyone has that little voice in their head, the one that talks to you when you're thinking. Mine used to be in Spanish, but I trained it to speak in English. For example, if I was cooking, my brain used to say in Spanish, "Tengo que agregar más sal." Now, I forced my inner voice to say, "I need to add more salt." If I was running late, my brain used to think, "Voy a llegar tarde, necesito apresurarme." Now, I trained myself to think, "I'm going to be late, I need to hurry up." At first, I had to remind myself constantly, but over time, English became my default thinking language. Having an English persona, I also gave myself permission to be a little different in English. When I spoke English, I noticed my tone, expressions, and even my personality felt slightly different. For example, in Spanish, I was more direct. But in English, I naturally started using polite phrases like, "Could you please help me with this?" instead of just, "Help me with this." At first, this felt unnatural, but I realized it wasn't wrong. It was just a different cultural way of speaking, so I embraced it. 16. Watching my dreams change to English. One of the most shocking moments in my journey was when I had my first dream in English. At that point, I knew my brain had truly shifted. It was a simple dream. I was ordering coffee, and the barista asked, "What would you like?" I answered, "A latte, please." It wasn't anything extraordinary, but when I woke up, I was amazed. My subconscious mind was now functioning in English. After that, more of my dreams became bilingual, and eventually, most of them were in English. That was when I knew my brain had made the switch. 17. Speeding up my thinking in English. No more delays. Even though I was thinking in English, sometimes I still had pauses when speaking. I wanted to think and respond faster, so I worked on this in 3 ways. 1. Rapid-fire English. Speaking without thinking too much, I practiced speaking English fast, even if I made mistakes. For example, I would set a timer for 1 minute and try to describe something around me as fast as possible. Right now, I'm sitting on my bed. My laptop is in front of me. The light from my lamp is a little too bright, but it's okay. I have a cup of tea next to me, and I can smell the minty aroma. I did this daily, and it forced my brain to react quickly in English. 2. Speed reading and summarizing. I read short English articles or watched videos. then tried to summarize them immediately in my own words. For example, if I watched a video about space, I would immediately say, "So, in the video, they explained that Mars used to have water, but now it's a dry planet. Scientists believe that." This helped me think in English without hesitating. Answering without translation. I started asking myself random questions in English and answering instantly. Example. Question. What's your favorite movie? My answer. Oh, I love Interstellar because it's about space and time travel. The story is emotional and the music is amazing. I didn't give myself time to translate, I just answered. This made my responses in English much faster over time. 18. Training myself to think in English during emotional moments. Thinking in English when I was relaxed was easy, but when I was stressed, angry, or emotional, my brain wanted to switch back to Spanish. So I trained myself to react in English, even in tough moments. Example 1. When I felt frustrated, one day, I lost my keys and immediately thought, Dios mío, ¿dónde puse mis llaves? Then I caught myself and rephrased it in English. Oh my God! Where did I put my keys? The more I did this, the more my emotions became connected to English. Example 2. When I was excited before, if I got good news, my first thought was, I cannot believe it. Esto es increíble. But I trained myself to react in English. I can't believe it. This is amazing. It might seem like a small change, but this was a huge step in rewiring my brain to think in English naturally. 19th. My English fluency today. The final transformation now. I don't have to try to think in English anymore. It just happens naturally. I wake up thinking in English. I talk to myself in English without realizing it. I even feel emotions in English first. One day, I was having a deep conversation with a friend, and she asked, "Do you still translate in your head?" I stopped for a moment and realized, no, I don't. That's when I knew. I had truly trained my mind to think in English. 21. Handling complex thoughts in English. Thinking beyond simple sentences. At first, I could think in English only for simple things like, I need water. The weather is nice today. I will go to the store. But when it came to deeper thoughts, like making decisions, analyzing problems, or expressing emotions, my brain switched back to Spanish. I knew that to truly think in English, I needed to process complex thoughts in English too. How I trained my brain for complex thoughts? One, journaling in English. I started writing my real thoughts in English, not just practicing vocabulary. For example, instead of just writing, "Today was a good day," I pushed myself to write, "Today I felt a little overwhelmed because I had too many tasks to complete. But after organizing my schedule, I felt more in control and less stressed." Writing my emotions helped me think in English at a deeper level. 2. Asking myself why in English. When I had a thought, I asked myself why. All in English. Example. I feel tired today. Why? Because I didn't sleep well last night. This small habit forced me to process my thoughts in English, not just state them. 3. Explaining my opinions in English. I started discussing topics with myself in English. For example, if I watched a movie, instead of just thinking, "It was good," I pushed myself to think, "I really liked the movie because the main character was relatable. The story had a lot of emotional depth, and the ending was unexpected. By doing this daily, I became comfortable thinking deeply in English, not just speaking simple sentences. 22nd. Internal monologue. Making English my default thought language. There was a big moment in my journey when I realized something surprising. I was arguing with myself in English. Yes, seriously. One day, I made a mistake while cooking, and instead of thinking in Spanish, my inner voice automatically said, "Why did I do that? I should have checked the recipe first." It was in that moment that I truly understood. I had rewired my brain. How you can do this. Throughout the day, narrate what you're doing in English. When something surprises you, react in English. When you feel frustrated, express it in English in your head. Soon, your default thought language will switch to English without you even realizing it. 23. When English started feeling like my first language, I'll never forget the day someone asked me, "Do you dream in English or Spanish?" I had to stop and think about it. The truth was, most of my dreams were now in English. That was when I knew I wasn't just learning English, I was living it. Another moment that shocked me was when I visited my home country after months of living in an English-speaking environment. I was standing in line at a store, and when it was my turn, I accidentally said, "Hi, how are you?" The cashier looked at me strangely and replied in Spanish. That's when I realized English had become my automatic way of thinking. This is something that happens naturally when you surround yourself with the language. 24. Overcoming the last barrier. Thinking in English when stressed, one of the hardest parts of this journey was learning to think in English even when I was stressed. When I was relaxed, I could think in English easily. But when I was nervous, like during a job interview or a difficult conversation, my brain wanted to switch back to Spanish. To fix this, I had to practice putting myself in stressful English situations. What I did: 1. Practice speaking under pressure. I recorded myself answering difficult questions quickly without thinking. 2. Put myself in real situations. I purposely spoke to native speakers even when I was nervous. 3. Prepared set responses. I memorized natural ways to respond in conversations, so I didn't have to translate under pressure. After doing this consistently, English became my go-to language, even in high-pressure moments. 25. The final transformation. When I knew I had made it to your day, I was sitting in a coffee shop, and I overheard a group of people speaking in Spanish. For the first time in my life, my brain had to translate Spanish into English. That was when I really knew I had completely trained my mind to think in English. Now I don't just speak English. I am an English thinker. I wake up thinking in English. I solve problems in English. I even dream in English. English is no longer something I study. It's part of who I am. 26. Your journey starts today. If you want to train your mind to think in English, remember, it's not about learning English. It's about living it. Start with small thoughts in English and build up to complex ones. Change your inner voice. Force it to use English. Express emotions in English, even when you're frustrated or excited. Put yourself in situations where you must think in English. One day, without even realizing it, You'll wake up and English will be the first language in your mind. 27. The shift from translating to thinking directly in English. One of the biggest breakthroughs in my journey was when I stopped translating in my head. Before, every time I wanted to say something, my brain did this. Step 1. Think in Spanish. Step 2. Translate to English. Step 3. Speak in English. This process made me slow and nervous. Sometimes I even got stuck because my brain couldn't find the right words. I knew that fluent speakers didn't think like this. They just thought in English naturally. So, I asked myself, how can I remove the translation step? The solution. Labeling. Everything in English. I started labeling everything around me in English without thinking in Spanish first. Example. When I saw a door, I didn't think, puerta, door. Instead, my brain immediately thought, door. I did this with everything. Book, coffee, pen chair. By doing this every day, my brain stopped depending on Spanish and started recognizing objects directly in English. 28. Speaking without thinking. The speed response method. Even when I started thinking in English, I still had one problem. I hesitated before speaking. I wasn't slow because I didn't know the words. I was slow because I was still analyzing everything before speaking. So, I forced myself to respond instantly in English. How I trained my brain for instant speaking, one question, answer drills. I made a list of common questions and trained myself to respond immediately without overthinking. Example. Questions. How was your day? It was great. I went to the park and enjoyed the fresh air. What do you like to do? I love reading books, especially mystery novels. What's your favorite food? I really enjoy pasta, but I also love sushi. At first, I was slow, but with practice, my brain started forming sentences automatically. 2. Shadowing technique. I listened to native speakers and repeated after them without pausing. For example, I played a short sentence and immediately repeated it. I really love this place. I really love this place. This trained my brain to produce English sounds quickly and naturally. 29. Training my brain to think in English, even in my dreams. One of the craziest things that happened to me was when I started dreaming in English. At first, my dreams were mixed. Some English, some Spanish. But over time, my dreams became fully in English. This was a sign that my brain was truly rewired. How I made this happen. 1. Listening to English before sleeping every night. I listened to an English podcast or watched a short video in English. This made my brain absorb English even while I was resting. 2. Writing a daily journal in English before bed. I wrote my thoughts in English. Even simple things like, today, I felt happy because I finished my project. 3. Self-talk before sleeping. I imagined conversations in English before I fell asleep. I pictured myself speaking fluently and confidently. One day, I woke up realizing my dream had been entirely in English. That's when I knew. English wasn't just something I was learning. It was becoming part of me. 30. Handling fast conversations. The final challenge. Even after all this training, I still had one big problem. Native speakers talk too fast. I could think in English, but when I heard real English conversations, I sometimes felt lost. So, I developed a strategy to train my brain to handle fast English. The chunking technique. Instead of trying to understand every word, I focused on groups of words, chunks. Before, I tried to listen like this: I don't know if I want to go to the party. Instead, I trained my brain to hear whole ideas. I don't know if I want to go to the party. This made listening easier and faster. 31. The moment I realized I was thinking in English, like a native one day, I was walking down the street and someone asked me for directions in English. Without hesitation, I responded naturally, "Oh, you just have to go straight and turn left at the traffic light." After they walked away, I had a realization. I didn't translate. I didn't hesitate. I just spoke. At that moment, I finally knew. I was thinking in English like a native. Why thinking in English matters. Many people can read, write, and even understand spoken English, but struggle to speak fluently. The reason? They are still thinking in their native language and then translating into English. This process is slow, unnatural, and often results in hesitation. If you want to speak English fluently and confidently, you must train your mind to think directly in English. The goal is to reduce translation time and increase automatic responsibility. This means when you see something, hear something, or have an idea, your brain should process it in English instead of your native language. But how do you do this? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Let's dive deep into proven tips and techniques to train your mind to think in English naturally. 1. Surround yourself with English. Think of learning a language like swimming. You don't learn swimming by reading books about it. You learn by getting into the water. Similarly, if you want to think in English, you must immerse yourself in English as much as possible. How to do this? Checkmark. Listen to English every day. Watch English movies, TV shows, and YouTube videos. Listen to English podcasts and audiobooks. Play English songs and try to understand the lyrics. Read in English regularly. Read English books, blogs, or news articles. Change your phone and social media settings to English. Follow English content on social media platforms. Speak to yourself in English. Talk to yourself about your day in English. Describe what you see around you in English. Practice thinking in English while cooking, cleaning, or exercising. Use English for daily activities. Write grocery lists, reminders, and notes in English. Change your diary or journal entries to English. Try to dream in English. Yes, it's possible. Example: instead of thinking in your native language, I need to buy vegetables from the market. English thinking: I should go to the market and buy some vegetables. At first, it may feel unnatural, but with practice, your brain will get used to it. Second stop, translating in your head. Many English learners struggle with fluency because they think in their native language first and then translate into English. This creates a delay and makes them speak slower. How to break this habit? Use English to English definitions. Instead of using a bilingual dictionary, use an English to English dictionary. For example, instead of translating happy into your language, find an English definition: feeling joy or pleasure. Practice word association in English. If you see an apple, think apple instead of translating it. Create mental pictures instead of words. For example, When you think of ocean, imagine the waves, sand, and seagulls instead of the word in your native language. Use simple sentences in your head. If you don't know a difficult word, use a simpler way to describe it. Example: if you don't know the word frustrated, say, I feel bad because things are not going well. Example: instead of thinking, I am feeling sleepy, translated from your language, train your brain to automatically think, I need some rest. 3. Develop a thinking routine in English. Thinking in English must become a habit. The more you practice, the easier it will become. How to create a routine. Morning routine. The moment you wake up, think about your day in English. Example: today I have to go to work. I will meet my friend at lunch. I should not forget to buy milk. Daily life practice. While walking or traveling, describe what you see in English. Example: there is a red car passing by. A woman is walking her dog. The sky is blue today. Before sleeping, think about what you did today in English. Example: I woke up at 7 a.m. I had eggs and toast for breakfast. I watched a movie in the evening. Example: native language thinking. I need to finish my work before dinner. English thinking. I should complete my work before dinner. This simple habit will train your brain to use English automatically. 4. Talk to yourself in English. Self-talk method. If you have no one to practice English with, don't worry. You can talk to yourself. This is one of the most effective ways to train your brain to think in English. How to do it? Checkmark, use a mirror. Stand in front of a mirror and have a conversation with yourself. Example: hey, how are you today? Oh, I'm feeling good. What's my plan for today? I need to go shopping. Think aloud. Instead of thinking silently, speak your thoughts out loud. Example: I should clean my room. Where should I start? Maybe I'll begin with the bed. Narrate your actions. Describe what you're doing in real time. Example: now I'm making tea. I will boil the water first. Then I will add tea leaves. Example: instead of thinking, where did I put my phone? In your native language, say, where is my phone? I remember placing it on the table. Use flashcards and mind mapping for faster thinking. Flashcards and mind maps help your brain recall English words quickly. How to use them. Check mark flashcards. Write an English word on one side and its English definition on the other. Look at a word and say a sentence with it. Mind maps. Take a topic, e.g., travel, and write related words. Airplane, luggage, passport, hotel, sightseeing. Use these words to form sentences in your mind. Example: for the word book, think of noun form, I am reading a book. Verb form, I need to book a hotel. This method helps you think faster without translation. 6. Practice thinking in English with a timer. To speed up your thinking process, use a timer. How to do it. Set a 30-second timer. Look at an object and describe it in English within 30 seconds. Example: this is a chair. It is made of wood. It has 4 legs. Set a 1-minute timer. Think of a topic and talk about it for 1 minute without stopping. Example: my favorite food is pizza. I love cheese. I eat pizza once a week. Example: instead of stopping to translate, force your brain to think quickly in English. Keep practicing. Thinking in English is not an overnight process, but if you practice daily, you will gradually train your brain to think naturally in English. Quick summary of tips. Surround yourself with English. Stop translating in your head. Create a daily thinking routine. Talk to yourself in English. Use flashcards and mind maps. Practice with a timer. The more you practice, the faster your brain will adapt. Soon, you'll find yourself thinking in English effortlessly. Advanced techniques to train your mind to think in English naturally. Now that you have a strong foundation, let's dive even deeper into advanced techniques to take your English thinking skills to the next level. These methods will help you make English a natural part of your thought process without conscious effort. 7. Use the question and answer method. Think like a conversation. One of the best ways to train your mind is to create a mental conversation with yourself. This method forces your brain to think in English instead of just memorizing words. How to do it? Ask yourself questions and answer in English. What did I do today? I went to the supermarket and bought some fruit. How do I feel right now? I feel a little tired, but I'm happy. Create scenarios in your mind, imagine different situations, and talk through them in English. Example: I'm at a restaurant. What should I order? I think I will have a burger and fries. Maybe I should get a drink too. Practice role-playing. Pretend to be in an interview. Question: why do you want this job? Answer: I love working with people and helping solve problems. Think about future plans in English. Tomorrow, I will wake up early, go for a run, and then study English. Example: instead of thinking, I have a meeting later, in your native language, train your brain to think, I need to prepare for my meeting. I should make some notes. 8. Use the one-word, 5 sentences technique. To improve your English fluency, challenge yourself to think of 5 different sentences using a single word. How to do it? Pick a random word and create sentences. Example word: travel. I love to travel to new countries. Traveling helps me learn about different cultures. I want to travel to Paris next year. My friend and I are planning a road trip. Travel is expensive, but it's worth it. Repeat this with different words. Every day, choose common words: food, work, friends, study, dream, love, etc. This will train your brain to think in English creatively. Particum. Example: instead of translating, your brain will naturally create sentences in English. 9. Think in English while watching or reading something. This method helps you connect English to real-life situations so that thinking in English becomes automatic. How to do it? Checkmark. Watch a movie or TV show in English. Pause after a scene and describe what happened in English. Example: the man is angry because he lost his job. Read an article and summarize in English. Read an English news article. Close the article and explain it in your own words in English. Example: the article talks about climate change and how it affects our planet. Predict what will happen next. While watching a show, think, what will happen next? Example: maybe the main character will get a new job. Example: instead of thinking in your native language while watching a movie, Train yourself to mentally describe everything in English. 10. Try the 5-minute thinking challenge. To make thinking in English a habit, challenge yourself to think only in English for 5 minutes every day. How to do it? Set a timer for 5 minutes. During this time, think only in English. No translation. No switching to your native language. Choose a topic and think in English. Example topics. What did I do today? What is my dream job? Describe my best friend. Gradually increase the time. Start with 5 minutes, then increase to 10, 15, or even 30 minutes. Example. Instead of translating, "Tomorrow I will go to the market," your brain will automatically think in English, "I need to buy some vegetables tomorrow." 11. Think in English while doing daily tasks. Make thinking in English a part of your everyday life. How to do it? While cooking, I need to chop the vegetables first. Then I will boil the rice. While walking or exercising, the weather is nice today. I can feel the fresh air. While shopping, do I need milk? Oh yes, I should buy some eggs too. While driving or traveling, there is too much traffic today. I hope I reach on time. Example. Instead of thinking, "I have to finish my work quickly," your brain will naturally think in English, "I need to complete my work soon." 12. Think about emotions in English thinking. In English is not just about objects and actions, it's also about feelings and emotions. How to do it? Describe your emotions in English. Instead of just feeling something, try to put it into words. Example. I feel excited because tomorrow is my birthday. Example. I am feeling tired after working all day. Use different emotional words. Happy, excited, joyful, cheerful, sad, upset, depressed, heartbroken, angry, frustrated, annoyed, furious, surprised, shocked, amazed, speechless. Make it a habit to express feelings in English. Before sleeping, think, how was my day? Was I happy, tired, or stressed? Example. Instead of just feeling happy, think, I had a great day. I feel satisfied and relaxed. Final challenge. Think in English for a whole day. Once you have practiced these techniques, challenge yourself to spend an entire day thinking only in English. How to do it? Start the morning in English. I have to wake up early today. What should I wear? Go through your day in English. I need to send an email to my manager. What should I eat for lunch? End the night in English. Today was a productive day. I finished all my work. Example. Instead of switching back to your native language, force your brain to stay in English mode. Keep practicing and stay consistent. Thinking in English will not happen overnight, but with daily practice, your brain will automatically switch to English without effort. Quick recap. Surround yourself with English. Stop translating in your head. Develop a daily thinking routine. Use the Q&A method for self-talk. Practice with flashcards and mind maps. Try the 5-minute thinking challenge. Think in English during daily activities. Express emotions in English. Challenge yourself to think in English for a whole day. You've now learned powerful techniques to train your mind to think in English naturally. But the real challenge is staying consistent and making this a habit. In this final section, We will dive even deeper into advanced strategies, real-life examples, and common challenges that learners face. Let's keep going and unlock the final secrets to thinking fluently in English. Advanced strategies to think in English, like a native speaker. 1. Shadowing technique. Copy native speakers in real time. One of the best ways to make English a natural part of your thinking process is to use the shadowing technique. How to do it? Check step 1. Find an English audio or video. Choose a podcast, YouTube video, or movie scene in English. Example: a TED Talk, a news segment, or an interview. Step 2. Listen and repeat in real time. Play the audio and try to repeat everything immediately. Don't pause. Try to keep up, even if you miss a few words. Check mark. Step 3. Focus on intonation and speed. Imitate the way native speakers stress words and change their tone. Example: if the speaker says, "I can't believe this happened," copy their tone, excitement, and rhythm. Step 4. Do this daily for 10 minutes. The more you do it, the faster your brain adapts to thinking in English. Example: instead of just listening passively, train yourself to speak and think at the same time. 2. Use English for problem solving and decision making. Your brain naturally thinks in your native language when making important decisions. But if you switch to English, you will start thinking in English effortlessly. How to do it? Whenever you have a problem, solve it in English. Example: what should I eat today? Instead of thinking in your native language, list the options in English. I could have pasta, but I also have some rice. Maybe I should make a salad. Make a daily to-do list in English. Instead of writing tasks in your native language, write: buy groceries, call my friend, finish my report, practice English. Plan your day in English every morning. Think: today I have to go to work, then I will exercise in the evening. Example: if you make every decision in English, your brain will automatically use English for thinking. 3. Create a Thinking in English journal. Writing your thoughts helps your brain organize ideas in English. How to do it? Check mark step 1. Get a small notebook or use your phone. This will be your personal English thinking journal. Step 2. Write your thoughts in English daily in the morning. Write: today I feel excited because I have a meeting. At night, write: I learned a new word today. Determined. Step 3. Don't worry about grammar. Just write. The goal is to train your brain to form sentences in English quickly. Example: instead of thinking, "I don't know how to say this in English," train yourself to write in simple English and gradually improve. 4. Talk to yourself in English. Yes, it works. Talking to yourself might feel strange at first, but it is a powerful way to train your brain. How to do it? Step 1. Describe what you are doing. I am making coffee. I need to add sugar. I should stir it well. Step 2. Practice conversations with yourself. Imagine you are talking to a friend. Hey, how are you? I'm good. What did you do today? Step 3. Ask and answer questions. What should I wear today? Maybe a blue shirt and jeans? Example: instead of thinking, "I don't have anyone to practice with," turn yourself into your own English-speaking partner. 5. Use word association to think faster in English. A powerful technique is to connect new words to familiar things. How to do it? Checkmark Step 1. Pick a word and connect it to an image example. Sun. Picture the bright sun in the sky. Step 2. Create a chain of words. Sun, warm, beach, vacation, relaxing, happy. This helps you think in English without translating. Step 3. Use mind maps for new words. Example: if you learn travel, create a mind map. Travel, airport, ticket, adventure, hotels, backpack. Example: instead of memorizing words alone, connect them to other words and images. 6. The No Native Language Challenge. One of the fastest ways to train your brain is to completely avoid your native language for a set period. How to do it? Checkmark Step 1. Set a rule. Only English for 1 hour. Challenge yourself to think, speak, and write only in English. Step 2. Increase the time gradually. Start with 1 hour per day, then try 3 hours, then a full day. Step 3. Change your phone and apps to English. This forces your brain to process information in English first. Example: instead of switching between languages, force your brain to stay in English mode. Common mistakes and how to avoid them. Mistake number 1. Thinking I need perfect grammar. Solution: just think in simple sentences first. Fluency is more important than grammar. Mistake number 2. Translating from your native language solution. Practice direct thinking by describing what you see around you in English. Mistake number 3. Waiting until you feel ready. Solution: start now. The more you practice, the faster you improve. Mistake number 4. Using only one learning method. Solution: combine listening, speaking, writing, and thinking exercises to get better results. Make thinking in English a daily habit. By now, you have learned powerful techniques that will reprogram your brain to think in English naturally. Let's recap. Shadowing technique. Repeat native speakers in real time. Problem solving in English. Make decisions in English. Thinking journal. Write daily thoughts in English. Talking to yourself. Practice self-conversations. Word association. Link words to images and other words. No native language challenge. Spend time only in English. The secret to fluency? Consistency. The more you practice, the faster your brain will adapt. It looks like you've reached the final stretch of mastering how to train your mind to think in English naturally. But here's the truth. Even with all these techniques, the real transformation happens when you make this a daily habit. So let's go even deeper into how you can stay consistent, overcome challenges, and truly start thinking like a native English speaker. How to make thinking in English a permanent habit training. Your mind is like training your muscles. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. But many learners start strong and then stop because they feel stuck. How do you keep going? Here's the answer. You need a strategy to stay consistent. Create a Think in English routine. If you don't make it a daily habit, your brain will go back to thinking in your native language. How to do it? Checkmark Step 1. Set specific times for thinking in English. Example: think in English every morning while making coffee, or every night before sleeping, recap your day in English. Step 2. Attach it to an existing habit. If you always scroll your phone at night, switch to an English podcast. If you talk to yourself in your native language, start doing it in English. Step 3. Keep a tracker. Use a simple checklist to mark every day you thought in English. Example: instead of waiting for the right time, make thinking in English automatic. 2. Push yourself outside your comfort zone. Many learners stay stuck because they only practice easy things. How to do it? Check Step 1. Try difficult English content. Instead of watching simple videos, watch documentaries or debates. Step 2. Have deep conversations. Instead of small talk, ask why questions and explain your opinions. Example: instead of "I like coffee," say "I love coffee because the taste is rich and it keeps me energized." Step 3. Describe complex feelings in English. When you feel sad, happy, or confused, explain why in English. Example: instead of avoiding difficult English, challenge yourself to think deeply in English. 3. Overcome the fear of making mistakes. A big reason why people don't think in English is because they are afraid of mistakes. Wrong thinking. What if my English is wrong? I don't have enough vocabulary. People will laugh at my mistakes. Right. Thinking. Making mistakes is part of learning. The more I think in English, the faster I improve. Every mistake teaches me something new. How to overcome the fear? Check Step 1. Accept that mistakes are normal. Even native speakers make grammar mistakes sometimes. Step 2. Focus on progress, not perfection. Instead of thinking, "Is my English correct?" think, "Did I think in English today?" Step 3. Use a growth mindset. Change your mindset to, "Every mistake I make helps me think faster in English." Example: instead of stopping because of fear, use mistakes as stepping stones. 4. Think in English even when you're tired. Many learners only think in English when they feel fresh. But what about when you're tired? How to do it? Checkmark Step 1. Prepare simple English thoughts in advance. Have common phrases ready in your mind. Example: if you always say, "I'm so tired," train yourself to say it in English automatically. Step 2. Use English in low-energy moments. Instead of stopping completely, think in short English phrases. Example: I need coffee. I should rest for a bit. Tomorrow will be a good day. Step 3. Reward yourself for small wins. Even thinking one sentence in English when you're tired is a success. Example: instead of skipping English when you're tired, train your brain to use it no matter what. 5. Make thinking in English fun. If thinking in English feels boring, you won't do it consistently. So, how can you make it exciting? How to do it? Checkmark Step 1. Play thinking games. Example: word chain, game. Think of a word. Connect it to another word. Keep going. Example: sun, hot, beach, vacation, relaxation. Step 2. Use English to plan fun activities. Plan a trip, write a bucket list, or create a dream life plan, all in English. Step 3. Imagine you are a movie character. Pretend you are in an English-speaking movie and think like the character. Example: instead of forcing yourself, make thinking in English something you enjoy. 6. Find an English thinking partner. If you have a friend who is also learning English, you can train your minds together. How to do it. Checkmark Step 1. Choose a partner. Find someone who also wants to practice thinking in English. Step 2. Set a daily English thinking challenge example. Each person must describe their day in English. The next day, ask each other questions in English. Step 3. Keep each other accountable. If one person forgets to think in English, remind them. Example: instead of thinking alone, train your mind together with someone. Final step: take action today. You now have all the tools to think in English naturally. But here's the truth. Rock it. What to do right now. Choose one technique from this guide. Set a goal to think in English for at least 10 minutes today. Track your progress and stay consistent. Remember, your brain will follow your habits. The more you think in English, the easier it gets. Now it's your turn. What's the first thought you will have in English today? Phew.